The grand hall of the Silvercrest Pack gleamed with polished marble and crystal chandeliers, but Sarah Thornwell felt none of its grandeur. She stood at the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by hundreds of pack members whose eyes bore into her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Her hands trembled at her sides as Alpha Dominic Ravenshade, her mate, or rather, her former mate, stood on the raised dais above her, his arm wrapped possessively around Lyanna Blackwater's waist. The daughter of the pack's wealthiest family smiled down at Sarah with barely concealed triumph. "Let the records show," Dominic's voice echoed through the hall, "that I, Alpha Dominic Ravenshade of the Silvercrest Pack, formally reject the mate bond with Sarah Thornwell, Omega of no standing, for the betterment of this pack's future." Sarah had known this moment was coming. The whispers had started 3 months ago when Lyanna returned from her travels abroad. The sidelong glances, the way Dominic had stopped meeting her eyes. But knowing hadn't prepared her for the searing pain that ripped through her chest as the bond began to fracture. She gasped, pressing a hand to her heart as a golden light flickered beneath her skin, visible for just a moment before she forced it down. Not here. Not now. Sarah Thornwell, the pack's elder, Magistrate Coldwell, stepped forward with the rejection scroll. "Do you accept this severing of the mate bond?" Every eye in the hall fixed on her. Custom dictated she should beg, plead for reconsideration. Omega wolves of her low rank didn't simply accept rejection from an alpha. It was social suicide, condemning her to a life of shame and isolation. Sarah's mother, Alara, stood near the back of the hall, her face pale with worry. Beside her, Sarah's younger sister Wren gripped their mother's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Well?" Dominic's voice held impatience now. "We haven't got all day." Her resolve crystallized in that moment. Perhaps it was the 3 years she'd spent loving a man who had never truly seen her. Perhaps it was the memory of how he'd promised her they would change the world together, break down the barriers between ranks. Or perhaps it was simply that she had finally reached the limit of how small she was willing to make herself. Sarah lifted her chin and met Dominic's eyes directly, a breach of protocol that sent murmurs rippling through the crowd. "I accept my fate as a rejected Omega," she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I accept it because I deserve better than a mate who would discard me for political gain. I accept it because I would rather stand alone with my dignity than spend my life begging for scraps of affection from someone incapable of true loyalty." The hall fell utterly silent. Dominic's face flushed red. "How dare you—" "I accept," Sarah continued, speaking over him in a way no Omega ever did to an alpha. "Because this rejection is not my failure. It's yours." For one heartbeat, 2, the silence held. Then chaos erupted. Pack members shouted in shock and outrage. Lyanna clutched Dominic's arm, her eyes wide with disbelief. Magistrate Coldwell looked as though he might faint. And then the massive doors at the rear of the grand hall slammed open with such force that they cracked against the marble walls. Every head turned as a figure strode through the entrance, flanked by 4 warriors in midnight black armor. The man at the center wore no crown, but power radiated from him like heat from a forge. He was tall, broader across the shoulders than any wolf Sarah had ever seen, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes like molten silver. Alpha King Kale Nightborn, ruler of all the Western territories. Sarah's breathing stopped. What was the Alpha King doing here? "Your Majesty!" Magistrate Coldwell rushed forward, bowing so deeply his nose nearly touched the floor. "We had no word of your arrival. I require no announcement to travel through my own territories." Kale's voice was deep, carrying an edge of danger that made Sarah's instincts scream at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to make herself invisible. She couldn't look away. Kale's mercury gaze swept the hall, taking in the scene before him with calculating intelligence. When his attention landed on Sarah, standing alone in the center of the chamber, recognition flickered across his face. Alpha Ravenshade, I arrived just in time to hear an Omega demonstrate more honor and strength than you've shown in your entire tenure as pack leader. Dominic sputtered. Your Majesty, I assure you this is simply an internal pack matter. Is it? Because it seems to me that you just rejected your true mate, a bond ordained by the moon goddess herself, in favor of a political alliance. That's not an internal matter. That's an insult to the very foundations of our kind. Sarah felt dizzy. The Alpha King was defending her? The Omega is weak, Your Majesty. Lyanna spoke up, her voice syrupy sweet. Surely you can understand that a pack needs strength in its Luna. I asked you nothing. Kale's words cracked like a whip, and Lyanna flinched back. In fact, I don't recall giving anyone in this hall permission to speak. He moved then, descending into the main floor with lethal grace. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. He walked directly to Sarah, and she found herself rooted to the spot, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Up close, Kale was even more imposing. He towered over her, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his steel-colored eyes. Those metallic irises studied her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare, as though he could see every secret she'd ever kept. "What's your name?" he asked quietly, though the supernatural acoustics of the hall carried his words to every ear. "Sarah Thornwell, Your Majesty." "And you accept this rejection, Sarah Thornwell?" She swallowed hard. "I do, Your Majesty." Approval glinted in his gaze. Interesting. He turned to address the hall at large, though he remained standing beside her. "Under the authority granted to me by the moon goddess and the ancient laws, I hereby claim Sarah Thornwell as my chosen mate." The hall erupted in pandemonium. Sarah's mind went blank with shock. Chosen mate? The Alpha King was claiming her? "You can't!" Dominic roared, leaping down from the dais. She's nothing to you," Kale said coldly. "You rejected her, remember? That bond is broken. She belongs to no pack, no Alpha, which means she's free to accept my claim." "This is madness!" Magistrate Coldwell wrung his hands. "Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to actually bond with an Omega of such low—" "Are you questioning my judgment, Magistrate?" The old wolf's face went gray. "No, Your Majesty. Of course not." Kale turned back to Sarah, and this time he spoke so quietly only she could hear. "I know you have questions. Trust me for now, and I'll explain everything once we're away from this circus." Sarah's analytical mind raced. This made no sense. Alpha Kings didn't claim random rejected Omegas out of nowhere. There had to be a reason, some political maneuvering she didn't understand. But as she looked into those silver eyes, she saw recognition, as though he'd been looking for her specifically. "Well?" Kale raised his voice again. "Do you accept my claim, Sarah Thornwell?" She thought of her mother and sister, of the tiny apartment they shared on the edge of pack territory. She thought of the years she'd spent studying healing arts in secret, hiding the full extent of her abilities because Omegas weren't supposed to be powerful. She thought of Dominic's face when she'd told him she loved him, and the way he'd looked through her, as though she were invisible. And she thought of the words she'd spoken just moments ago. "I deserve better." "I accept," Sarah said clearly. Kale's hand closed around hers, and the moment their skin touched, radiant power exploded between them. Not the dying embers of her bond with Dominic, but something entirely new. A surge of magic so intense that it drove both of them to their knees. Sarah heard screaming, but couldn't tell if it was her own voice or someone else's. The luminous brilliance grew brighter, forcing the crowd to shield their eyes. She felt Kale's hand tighten around hers, felt his strength reaching for something deep inside her, calling to abilities she'd kept locked away her entire life. No, she thought frantically. Not here. They can't know what I am. With tremendous effort, she shoved the power back down, forcing the light to dim. When her vision cleared, she found herself on her hands and knees, breathing hard. Kyle knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. Fascinating, he murmured, so quietly she barely heard it. He rose smoothly and helped her to her feet. We're leaving. Now. Your Majesty, Magistrate Coldwell ventured, surely there are protocols. Send them to the capital. I'll sign whatever needs signing there. Kale's tone brooked no argument. My mate requires rest after her ordeal. He turned to Sarah's mother, who stood frozen with shock near the wall. Alara Thornwell. You and your younger daughter will be escorted to the capital within the week. You'll be given quarters in the royal residence and positions suited to your skills. Alara's eyes filled with tears. Your Majesty, I thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your daughter for her courage. Kale's hand settled on the small of Sarah's back, warm even through the fabric of her dress. Say your goodbyes quickly. Sarah rushed to her mother and sister, hugging them both tightly. I don't understand what's happening, she whispered. Neither do I, her mother murmured back. But I saw that light, Sarah. He knows. Or suspects. I'll be careful, Sarah promised. Wren pulled back, her young face fierce despite her tears. He better treat you right, or I'll write him a very stern letter. Sarah laughed despite everything, then allowed Kale to guide her toward the doors. As they walked through the crowd, she caught Dominic's expression, rage and something that might have been regret warring on his face. She looked away. He was nothing to her now. The journey through the pack house passed in a blur. Sarah's mind raced with questions as Kale led her to a courtyard where a sleek black vehicle waited, its engine already running. One of Kale's warriors opened the rear door, and the Alpha King gestured for her to enter first. As she slid into the leather seat, reality began to set in. She'd just been claimed by the most powerful Alpha in the Western Territories. Her entire life had changed in the span of minutes. Kale settled beside her, and the door closed, sealing them in relative privacy. The vehicle began to move, carrying them away from Silvercrest Pack territory. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kale reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver flask. You'll want this. What is it? Something to steady your nerves. That bonding flash shouldn't have happened, not without the actual claiming bite. Which raises some very interesting questions about what you really are, Sarah Thornwell. Cold dread washed through her. She'd managed to hide her true nature her entire life. Had she just been claimed by the one person with the power and perception to uncover her secret? I'm just an Omega, she said carefully. Kale's laugh was low and dangerous. No, you're not. But don't worry, we have a 2-hour drive to the capital. That gives us plenty of time to discuss exactly what you are, why I've been searching for you for 5 years, and what role you're going to play in the war that's coming. Her mouth went dry. War? Oh, yes. His piercing gaze gleamed in the dim interior of the vehicle. Didn't I mention? The reason I need you isn't romantic, Sarah. You're the key to saving our entire species from extinction. No pressure. The vehicle accelerated, and Sarah watched through the window as Silvercrest Pack territory disappeared behind them, taking with it the only life she'd ever known. The royal capital of Thornmere rose against the twilight sky like something from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on one's perspective. Sarah pressed her face to the vehicle's window, watching as enormous walls of black stone materialized from the mist, their surfaces carved with ancient runes that pulsed with faint blue light. The warding walls, Kale said, noticing her stare. They've protected the capital for 3,000 years. Nothing gets through them without permission. Nothing? Sarah asked. Nothing living, at least. His tone carried a weight that made her shiver. The vehicle passed through a massive gate, and Sarah glimpsed guards stationed every few feet along the ramparts, warriors in armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each carried weapons she didn't recognize, strange crystalline blades that hummed with power. "You're scaring her, Your Majesty," said Tobias Greymont, Kale's captain of the guard, from the front passenger seat. He was a compact man with warm brown eyes and an easy smile. "Perhaps ease her into the supernatural arms race?" "Better scared and prepared than comfortable and dead," Kale replied, but his hand found Sarah's and squeezed gently. "Though Tobias is right. I'm getting ahead of myself." The royal residence sprawled across acres of manicured grounds. The main building was constructed of pale gray stone that seemed to glow from within, and Sarah counted at least 7 towers spiraling toward the stars. "This is where you live?" she breathed. "Home sweet fortress," Kale said dryly. "Come, my sister will want to meet you immediately, and she gets testy when kept waiting." "Sister?" Sarah's mind spun as Kale led her through corridors of such opulence that she felt like a muddy boot print on pristine carpet. Servants bowed as they passed, their eyes lingering on her with undisguised curiosity. They stopped before an ornate door carved with images of wolves running beneath a full moon. Kale knocked once, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. "Kale!" A woman's voice rang out, filled with exasperation. "I've told you repeatedly that even the Alpha King should wait for an invitation before barging into a lady's." She stopped mid-sentence as Sarah stepped into view. Oh. Princess Mira Nightborn was beautiful in a way that made Sarah acutely aware of her own plain dress and travel-must hair. She had the same silver eyes as her brother, but where Kale's held danger, Mira's sparkled with mischief and intelligence. She wore training leathers rather than a gown, and a practice sword rested against her desk. "Mira, meet Sarah Thornwell, my claimed mate." Kale's introduction was blunt. "Sarah, my younger sister. Princess Mira. She's a pain in my ass but occasionally useful." "Occasionally?" Mira circled Sarah like a hawk studying its prey, though her expression held curiosity rather than hostility. "I run your entire intelligence network, coordinate diplomatic relations with 4 neighboring territories, and I saved your life at least twice this year alone." "Twice?" Kyle raised an eyebrow. "I only remember once." "The second time was so well executed, you never knew you were in danger." "You're welcome." Mira stopped in front of Sarah and smiled. "Welcome to the madhouse. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to accept my brother's claim. I haven't decided which yet." "Neither have I," Sarah admitted, which made Mira laugh. "Oh, I like her." "Kale, you actually found someone with a spine. I'm impressed." "Can you help her get settled?" Kale asked, and Sarah noticed the weariness creeping into his voice for the first time. "I need to speak with the council about recent developments." Mira's expression sobered. "They're not going to be happy?" "They're never happy. That's why they're on the council." Kale turned to Sarah, and his hand cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we'll talk properly. For now, trust that you're safe here." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with the princess. Mira's playful expression faded. "Right. Let's get the awkward questions out of the way. First, do you actually want to be here, or did my brother coerce you?" "I accepted his claim willingly, but I don't understand why he made it." "That's fair." Second question, what do you know about the Veil Rift?" "The what?" Mira's eyes widened. "Nothing? He brought you here and explained nothing?" She muttered something uncomplimentary about her brother's communication skills. This is going to take wine. A lot of wine. An hour later, Sarah sat in a plush chair nursing a glass of red wine and trying to process everything the princess had told her. So let me make sure I understand, Sarah said slowly. There's a tear in reality itself called the Veil Rift. Through this tear, creatures from the Shadow Realm are trying to invade our world, and the only thing holding them back is a magical barrier maintained by special wolves, healer wolves, who can manipulate vital energy itself. Exactly, Mira confirmed. They're incredibly rare, maybe one born every 100 years, and they're the only ones who can strengthen the barrier. Sarah's pulse quickened. And you think I'm one of these healer wolves? My brother does. That's why he's been searching for you. Mira leaned forward. The flash of light during your claiming? That only happens when two wolves with complementary powers connect. Kale has destructive magic. He can unmake things, break them down to their component energies. You, apparently, can build and heal. Together, you're a defense against something that wants to devour our entire world. Sarah stood abruptly, wine forgotten, and moved to the window. The capital spread out before her, thousands of lights twinkling in the darkness. All those lives, unaware of the threat hanging over them. What if you're wrong? She asked. What if I'm just an Omega with a minor healing gift? Then we're all going to die, Mira said matter-of-factly. But I've seen the reports. I've read the prophecies, and I saw that light in the grand hall through the scrying mirror. You're the Sunweaver, Sarah, the one who can mend what's been torn. I don't feel like a prophesied savior, Sarah whispered. I feel like a terrified girl who just had her entire life upended. Good. That means you're sane. Mira joined her at the window. My brother may be arrogant and terrible at explanations, but he doesn't make mistakes about things like this. Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open. Tobias rushed in, his usually friendly face tight with alarm. Princess, we need you in the council chamber immediately, and fetch Sarah. The king wants her there too. What's happened? Mira demanded. An attack. Something came through the Veil Rift. Creatures are moving toward Silvercrest territory. We've issued evacuation orders. Sarah's blood turned to ice. My mother and sister. They're still there. They weren't supposed to leave until next week. The king is coordinating rescue operations now, Tobias said quickly, but he needs you both in the council chamber. As they rushed through the corridors, a servant intercepted them, pressing clothes into Sarah's arms. His Majesty requests you change into these, my lady, court attire. Sarah looked down at the elegant dress, deep midnight blue with silver threading. It was beautiful, but felt like a costume. I'll help you, Mira said, steering her into nearby chambers. We have maybe 5 minutes before the council loses patience entirely. When they finally entered the council chamber, Sarah understood why the change had been necessary. 7 of the most powerful wolves in the territory sat around a curved table, all dressed in formal attire, all radiating authority. Kale stood at the head of the table, now wearing formal robes that somehow made him look even more imposing. His eyes found hers immediately, and his expression softened before he turned back to the council. As I was saying, the breach was contained before any creatures reached inhabited territory. But it confirms what we've suspected. The attacks are escalating. Which is why we need the Sunweaver tested immediately, said a silver-haired woman. Your Majesty, if she's truly what you believe, we need to know now. Councilwoman Vex, Sarah has been in the capital for less than 5 hours. Give her time to adjust before we start running experiments. Time is a luxury we don't have, growled a heavy-set man at the far end of the table. Every day we wait, more people die. Sarah felt all eyes turn to her, weighing, judging, calculating her worth. What would these tests involve? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Kale's jaw tightened. Sarah, you don't have to. I want to know. If I can help, I need to understand how. Councilwoman Vex's expression softened slightly. Nothing painful, child. Simply a demonstration of your abilities, observed by our scholars. We need to know your capabilities to protect you properly. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm began to wail, different from before, more urgent, more frantic. And then the entire building shook. The council chamber erupted into chaos as another tremor rocked the palace. Sarah grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. Report! Kyle's voice cut through the panic like a blade. A warrior burst through the doors, his armor scorched and smoking. Your Majesty, the Veil Rift has expanded. It's now visible from the city walls. And there's something coming through. Councilwoman Vex was already on her feet. How long do we have? Minutes. Maybe less. Kyle's mercury gaze found Sarah's across the table. I need to ask something of you. Something unfair and dangerous. Ask, Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Come with me to the Veil Rift. You don't have to do anything. I just need to see if your presence affects it. Sarah thought of her mother and sister, somewhere between Silvercrest and the capital, fleeing creatures she couldn't even imagine. She thought of all those lights in the city below, all those lives hanging by a thread. Take me there, she said. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in an armored vehicle, dressed in tactical gear that Mira had thrust into her hands with grim efficiency. Kyle sat beside her, now wearing black combat armor that made him look even more dangerous. Tobias drove while Mira rode in the passenger seat, cradling a crystalline rifle that hummed with energy. When we get there, you stay behind the barrier line. Understood? Kale said. What barrier line? The one my warriors died to establish 6 months ago when this nightmare began. The Veil Rift is contained within a circle of bloodstone. Nothing from the Shadow Realm can cross it yet, but the bloodstone weakens with each attack. The vehicle crested a hill, and Sarah's breathing hitched. Below them, in a valley that should have been peaceful meadow, reality itself had torn open. The Veil Rift hung in the air like a wound in the fabric of existence, a jagged tear that bled darkness and writhed with half-seen shapes. Around it, in a perfect circle, stood stones that glowed red with power. But even from a distance, Sarah could see cracks spiderwebbing across their surfaces. Mother Moon, she breathed. Yeah, Tobias said quietly. It's worse every time. They stopped at a command post where dozens of warriors prepared for battle. Kyle was immediately swarmed with reports and questions. Sarah stood to the side until a strange sensation washed over her. Her skin prickled, and suddenly she could feel the Veil Rift like a scream at the edge of her consciousness. A shift occurred deep within her awareness. Not just the existence of the rift itself, but something specific about its energy. It felt familiar somehow, like a taint she'd sensed before, though she couldn't place where. Without conscious thought, Sarah began walking toward the bloodstone barrier. Hey! A warrior moved to intercept her. Civilians aren't allowed. Let her pass, Kale's voice rang out. He'd noticed her trance-like state. Everyone, stand down. Sarah barely heard him. She was drawn forward by that familiar wrongness. The closer she got to the Veil Rift, the stronger the pull became. At the edge of the bloodstone circle, she stopped. The rift pulsed before her, and now she could see shapes moving in its depths. Not random creatures, but something organized, intentional. It's not natural, she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Someone made this. What? Kale appeared at her shoulder. Sarah, what are you talking about? This rift. It wasn't torn from the other side. It was opened from ours. She turned to face him, certainty flooding through her. Someone with healing magic did this, but they twisted it, inverted it. They didn't create life. They created a doorway to death. That's impossible, Mira said, but her voice wavered. Healing magic can't. It can if you corrupt it, if you take the power to create and mend and you turn it inside out. Sarah's eyes widened with horror. Kale, there's another healer wolf, one who's working against us. Before anyone could respond, one of the bloodstones shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Darkness poured through the gap, and from that darkness came something that made Sarah's blood freeze. A wolf emerged, ash-colored fur, eyes like empty voids, and when it opened its mouth, shadow spilled out like smoke. Its body seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the air around it grew cold enough that Sarah could see her breath. Shadowborn, Kale growled, drawing a weapon from his back, a sword that blazed with silver fire. Everyone, defensive positions. But the creature wasn't looking at the warriors. Its void eyes fixed directly on Sarah, and when it spoke, its voice was the sound of dying stars. Sunweaver. At last. Our master has waited so long for you. Then it lunged, impossibly fast, straight for Sarah's throat. Her hands flew up instinctively, and radiant power exploded from her palms. The creature struck her barrier and recoiled, shrieking. But the impact sent Sarah flying backward, and she felt her inner reserves crack and surge. Energy she'd kept locked away her entire life suddenly flooding free. She tried to force it back, to control it. But it was too much. Too strong. The amber brilliance grew brighter and brighter until everyone around her had to shield their eyes. Through the blazing radiance, Sarah saw Kale fighting his way toward her, saw Mira firing her crystalline rifle at more Shadowborn pouring through the breach, saw the bloodstone circle collapsing entirely. And then she saw something that made her heart stop. In the center of the veil rift, a figure stood watching. A man with silver hair and eyes that glowed with the same sunlit magic as hers. His left hand was wrapped in bandages that pulsed with dark energy, and corruption crept up his arm like frost on glass. He smiled, and in that smile, Sarah saw recognition. He knew her. Somehow, impossibly, he knew exactly who and what she was. "Hello, sister," his voice carried across the battlefield, clear despite the chaos. "I've been waiting for you to finally awaken." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Sister. She had no siblings except Ren. This was impossible. But even as she thought it, awareness bloomed deep in her blood, recognizing the truth in his claim. A phantom ache flared in her left hand, the pain she'd felt since childhood, with no source, no explanation. "No," she whispered. "Yes, we're twins, Sarah, two halves of one power, split apart by those who feared what we could become together. But I've found you now, and soon you'll understand. Soon you'll join me." "Never," Sarah snarled, and her power exploded outward in a wave that sent every Shadowborn within 50 yards flying. But the effort was too much for her untrained abilities. The world tilted, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Kale's voice, frantic and afraid, screaming her name. And the last thing she felt was strong arms catching her before she hit the ground, pulling her close, refusing to let her fall. Then nothing. Sarah woke to darkness and the smell of herbs she didn't recognize. Her body ached as though she'd been trampled by horses, and when she tried to move, every muscle screamed in protest. Slowly, her eyes adjusted to reveal a small chamber lit by a single candle. Stone walls. No windows. Underground. She realized with growing unease. "You're awake." "Good." Sarah's head snapped toward the voice, igniting fresh pain through her skull. A woman sat in the shadows, middle-aged, with iron-gray hair and eyes that gleamed with an intelligence both keen and slightly mad. "Who are you?" Sarah's voice came out as a rasp. "Dr. Cassia Renfell, The king's personal physician. The woman rose and approached with a vial of something that glowed faintly blue. Drink. It'll help with the pain? Sarah eyed the vial suspiciously. Where am I? The Royal Infirmary, specifically the secure wing where we keep patients who've had unusual reactions. Cassia's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. You've been unconscious for 72 hours, girl. Your power surge at the Veil Rift nearly killed everyone within 100 yards, including yourself. Nearly 4 nights. Sarah's heart clenched. Kyle, is he? The king is fine. Exhausted himself keeping a shield up to protect his warriors from your outburst, but he'll recover. Cassia pressed the vial into Sarah's hand. Now drink. The threat was casual, but real. Sarah drank, grimacing at the bitter taste. Almost immediately, warmth spread through her limbs and the pain receded to a dull ache. Better? Now, let's discuss what happened. You claim you saw someone in the Veil Rift, a man who called you sister. I don't claim anything. I saw him. Sarah pushed herself upright, ignoring the room's slight spin. He had healing magic like mine. He was controlling the rift. Yes, the king mentioned as much. Cassia pulled out a leather-bound journal and began sketching something. Describe him exactly. Every detail you remember. Sarah closed her eyes, bringing back that terrible moment. Silver hair. Golden eyes, the exact shade of mine when my power manifests. Tall, exceptionally so, maybe 6.5 feet. He wore robes marked with symbols I didn't recognize, but they felt old, ancient. Age? Distinguishing features? He looked about 30, but his eyes were older. And there was something wrong with his left hand. It was wrapped in bandages that glowed with the same dark energy as the Veil Rift. Cassia's pen stilled. When she looked up, her expression had shifted from clinical interest to something like fear. A tainted limb. That confirms it then. I've seen this before in ancient texts documenting the purge of ashes. The corruption always begins in one limb and spreads until it consumes the healer entirely. Confirms what? Before Cassia could answer, the door burst open. Kale strode in, still wearing tactical gear from the battle, now torn and stained with substances Sarah didn't want to identify. His steel-colored eyes blazed with barely contained emotion. Out, he said to Cassia without looking at her. Your Majesty, I'm in the middle of... Out! The physician gathered her things with obvious reluctance and left, closing the door behind her with more force than necessary. For a long moment, Kale just stared at Sarah. She stared back, taking in the exhaustion etched into his features, the new scar across his jaw that hadn't been there before, the way his hands trembled slightly before he clenched them into fists. You could have died, he said finally, his voice raw. Your power surge. If I hadn't gotten a shield up in time, you would have burned yourself out completely. Your living essence would have consumed itself. There would have been nothing left to save. But you did get a shield up, Sarah said quietly. You saved me. I barely saved you. He moved closer, and she could see the fear beneath his anger now. Nearly 4 days, Sarah. I've barely left your side, wondering if you'd ever wake up. Cassia telling me that your energy signature was fading, that you might be too far gone. His voice cracked, and suddenly Sarah understood. This wasn't just a king worried about losing a strategic asset. This was something deeper, more personal. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to lose control. I know. Kyle sank onto the edge of her bed, suddenly looking every bit as exhausted as she felt. It's not your fault. I pushed you too far, too fast. I was so focused on the threat that I forgot you've had no training, no preparation for this. Tell me about him, Sarah said. The man in the Veil Rift. You know who he is, don't you? Kale's jaw tightened. His name is Aldrich Sunweaver. And yes, before you ask, that surname isn't a coincidence. The Sunweavers were a legendary family line of healer wolves that existed centuries ago, renowned among our kind for their power. Sarah's blood went cold. Were? They were wiped out in the Purge of Ashes, 300 years ago. At least, that's what the histories claim. Kale met her eyes. But if Aldrich is truly a Sunweaver, and if he called you sister, then I'm one too, Sarah finished. But that's impossible. My mother's family has no such lineage. Records can be falsified, bloodlines can be hidden. Kale reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses. Sarah, if you are a Sunweaver, it changes everything. The prophecies speak of the line returning in the world's darkest hour. 2 siblings, one to destroy, one to restore. The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. And you think Aldrich is the destruction. I know he is. The Shadowborn serve him willingly. The veil rift opened exactly when he wanted it to. And that corrupted hand Cassia mentioned? That's what happens when a healer inverts their power, turns creation into decay. Eventually, it consumes them entirely. How long does he have? A year. Maybe less. Kyle's grip on her hand tightened. Which means we have less than that to stop him, because once the shadow rot takes him completely, he'll open the veil rift wide enough to let through. The Devourer itself. The thing that destroyed the Sunweavers the first time. The thing that's been waiting in the Shadow Realm for 3 centuries to finish what it started. It eats worlds, Sarah. Entire realities. And your brother is trying to give it ours. The room spun again, but this time it had nothing to do with physical weakness. Brother. She had a brother who wanted to end the world. I need to speak with my mother, she said suddenly. She must know something. The Sunweaver line doesn't just vanish. Someone had to hide it deliberately. She's in the convoy heading here now, Kyle said. Once they arrive safely, we'll get answers. He was cut off by an alarm that made Sarah's blood run cold. He was on his feet instantly, already moving toward the door. That's the evacuation alarm. The door slammed open and Mira rushed in, her face ashen. It's the refugee convoy, the one carrying survivors from Silvercrest, including Sarah's family. They're under attack. Aldrich sent an army of Shadowborn to hunt them. Sarah threw off the blankets, ignoring Kale's protests and her body's weakness. My mother and sister? I know. Kyle was already moving. Every warrior we have is mobilizing. I'm coming with you, Sarah said, swaying as she stood. Absolutely not. You can barely stand. Those are my people. Luminous power crackled around Sarah's hands, fed by sheer determination and adrenaline. That's my family out there. I'm not staying here safe while they die. Kale looked at her for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Then he turned to Mira. Get her armor. The reinforced kind. And find Cassia. I want every stabilizing potion we have. 10 minutes later, Sarah found herself back in an armored vehicle, dressed in tactical gear. Cassia had forced 3 vials down her throat, stimulant potions that burned through her veins like liquid fire, giving her borrowed strength she'd pay for later. If there was a later. The claiming flash created a partial bond between us, Kale said as the vehicle accelerated into the night. Not complete, but enough that I could sense when you were dying and channel my power to you. That's how I kept the shield up for so long. But it also means I'll feel it if you're in danger. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of what he was saying. Whatever happens, stay close to me, he continued. Aldrich wants you alive. He needs another Sunweaver to complete whatever ritual he's planning. Which means he'll try to take you. Let him try, Sarah said, and was surprised to find she meant it. The girl who'd been rejected in that grand hall days ago was gone. In her place was something harder, fiercer. Someone who had accepted what she was and what she had to do. The Sunweaver had awakened, and she was done hiding. The refugee column stretched for miles, hundreds of wolves fleeing Silvercrest's ruins, carrying what little they'd managed to save. Sarah pressed her face to the vehicle's window, searching frantically for her mother among the terrified masses. There! Tobias pointed ahead where the column had stopped, blocked by something Sarah couldn't see through the darkness and smoke. As they drew closer, ice flooded her veins. Shadowborn surrounded the refugees, dozens of the ash-colored wolves with void eyes and shadow-dripping maws. And standing at the center of the blockade, calm as death itself, was Aldrich. Behind him, the air shimmered with the same dark energy as the veil rift. He'd brought a piece of it with him, a tear in reality that followed him like a shadow. He looked exactly as Sarah remembered, but worse. The blight had spread. Now his entire left arm pulsed with dark energy, and veins of shadow crept up his neck toward his face. When he smiled, his teeth gleamed like polished bone. "Your Majesty," he called out as Kale's vehicle screeched to a halt. "How kind of you to bring my sister to me." Kyle emerged from the vehicle, his sword already blazing with silver fire. "Let them go, Aldrich. Your fight is with me, not with refugees." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong." Aldrich's golden eyes, so like Sarah's own, fixed on her as she stepped out behind Kale. "My fight has always been with her, with the other half of what we were meant to be." "I don't know you," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the stimulant potions making her heart race. "Don't you? Search your memories, little sister, the dreams you've had your whole life, the ones of a silver-haired boy who promised he'd come back for you. The phantom pain in your left hand that has no source, the feeling that part of you has always been missing." Sarah's world tilted. She did have those dreams, had dismissed them as childhood imagination. And her left hand did ache for no reason, ever since she could remember. "We're twins, Sarah. Born the same hour, blessed with the same power. When the purge came for our family, our mother made a choice. She split us apart, hid us in separate bloodlines, bound our memories. She thought it would save us." Aldrich's expression twisted with rage. "Instead, it crippled us both." "So you decided to end the world?" Mira had emerged from the vehicle, her crystalline rifle trained on Aldrich. "I decided to finish what the Devourer started. This world killed our family. It fears what we are, tries to suppress our power, forces us to hide. Why should I save it?" "Because innocent people will die," Sarah said, finally finding her voice. "These refugees, they had nothing to do with what happened to our family. Join me, Sarah. Together, we're unstoppable. We could rule as gods." For one terrible moment, Sarah felt the pull of his words. The bond between them sang through her blood, calling to something primal and ancient. But then she saw her mother, finally spotting Alara huddled with Ren among the refugees. Her mother's face was streaked with tears, her arms wrapped protectively around Sarah's sister. "No," Sarah said quietly. "I won't let you do this." Aldrich's expression hardened. "Then you'll die with them." He raised his corrupted arm and shadow erupted from his palm. But before it could reach the refugees, Sarah's power blazed to life. Radiant magic met darkness, and where they collided, the air itself screamed. "Get them out of here!" Kyle roared to his warriors. "Evacuate the refugees now!" Chaos erupted. Warriors rushed forward, creating a barrier between the Shadowborn and their prey. Tobias and Mira coordinated the evacuation with ruthless efficiency. And in the center of it all, Sarah and Aldrich stood locked in a battle of pure will. "You're strong," Aldrich admitted, his voice strained, "but strength alone isn't enough." He was right. The stimulants were burning out. Sarah felt them fading from her system even as she maintained the barrier, her body already weak from days of unconsciousness. She couldn't hold this forever. Sarah, Kyle's voice cut through the chaos. You have to invert it. Your power. It's all defense, all healing. But healing magic can destroy too if you reverse it. Kale fought his way toward her, cutting down Shadowborn with each swing of his blazing sword. Take what you know about mending and flip it inside out. That's how the decay starts, Sarah protested. Only if you let it consume you. But you're stronger than him. You haven't spent centuries festering in hatred. Kale finally reached her side, his own power flaring up to reinforce her shield. Trust yourself. Sarah looked at Aldrich, really looked at him. Beneath the taint, beneath the rage, she saw what he'd become. A cautionary tale of what happened when power turned inward, when healing became self-destruction. She wouldn't make his mistake. Taking a deep breath, Sarah reached inside herself to the place where her healing power lived. Carefully, delicately, she began to shift its polarity. Not inverting it entirely like Aldrich had done, but creating a balance. Light and shadow, creation and destruction, both necessary, both natural. The world exploded into sensation. Suddenly Sarah could feel everything, every blade of grass, every living creature for miles, every connection between them. And she understood. True healing wasn't just about building and mending. It was also about knowing when to cut away the disease, when to destroy what was beyond saving so that new growth could take root. I see now, she said, and her voice carried power that made even Aldrich flinch. You wanted us to rule as gods, but gods don't just create, brother. They also end what needs ending. She released the balanced power, and reality bent around her. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Aldrich's Shadowborn army simply unmade. Not violently, but as though they'd never existed at all. Sarah had found the corruption at their core, the twisted healing magic that gave them false life. And she'd cancelled it out. Aldrich staggered, his connection severed. What did you do? I learned what you never could. Sarah walked toward him, her power still blazing but controlled now, balanced. Our magic isn't meant for destruction alone or creation alone. It's meant for restoration, which sometimes means tearing down what's broken beyond repair. No! Aldrich's corrupted arm lashed out, shadow tentacles reaching for her throat. You don't get to be better than me. We were never the same. Sarah caught his wrist, and where her hand touched his tainted flesh, luminous power began to spread. You chose hatred. I choose healing. She poured her essence into him, not to destroy, but to heal. The blight fought her, writhing and screaming as her light burned through it. But Sarah held firm, digging deeper, searching for the source. And there, buried beneath centuries of anger and pain, she found it. The wound that had never healed, the moment their family was torn apart, the moment Aldrich lost everything he loved, the moment he'd chosen revenge over recovery. I can't fix the past, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she felt his pain as if it were her own. I can't bring back what we lost, but I can give you peace. I don't want peace, Aldrich snarled, even as his struggles weakened. You want it to stop hurting. Sarah's voice broke. I know. I feel it too. But this isn't the way. For one moment, looking into her eyes, Aldrich's expression softened. The decay retreated just enough for her to see the boy he'd been. Scared. Alone. Lost. Sister, he breathed. Then the veil rift tore open behind him with a sound like the universe screaming, and something vast and terrible reached through. The Devourer. Aldrich had been its anchor in this world, and now that anchor was failing. Sarah, run. Kale grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back. If that thing gets through, it won't stop with our world. Sarah met Kale's intense gaze. I have to end him. Completely. There has to be another way. The devourer used his hatred as a doorway. The only way to close it is to sever the connection entirely. Sarah smiled through her tears. You told me to trust myself. So trust me now. Before Cale could stop her, Sarah turned back to Aldrich. Her brother had fallen to his knees, the shadow rot consuming him rapidly. He looked up at her with eyes that were more gold than black, more human than void. End it, he whispered. Please, I'm so tired. Sarah knelt before him, cradling his face in her hands. I forgive you. For all of it. Then she unleashed her power. Not the balanced combination of light and shadow, but pure, undiluted healing magic. She poured living essence into him, so much that no body could contain it. Forced his cells to regenerate faster than they could sustain, pushed his healing factor beyond all natural limits. It was mercy disguised as destruction. Healing so intense it became obliteration. Aldrich's eyes widened with understanding, then with gratitude. Sister, he said one last time. And then he was gone, dissolved into amber brilliance that spiraled up and into the veil rift. The moment he vanished, the tear began to seal, reality knitting itself back together. But the effort had cost Sarah everything. She felt her own vital energy draining, consumed by what she'd done. Dimly, she was aware of Cale catching her as she fell, of his voice screaming her name. The memory of Aldrich's final moment, gratitude mixed with peace, would haunt her. But it would also heal her. She'd given him what he couldn't give himself, an end to suffering. Stay with me, Cale begged, and through her fading vision, Sarah saw tears streaming down his face. Please, don't leave me. Had to, she managed. No choice. Damn the choice. I need you. His hand pressed against her chest, and she felt his power joining hers. Destruction and creation, death and life, finding balance. You taught me that power doesn't have to consume us, that we can choose mercy. So choose it now. Choose to live. A profound shift occurred within her spirit. Where her essence had drained away, Cale's power flowed in to fill the void. Not replacing what she'd lost, but complementing it. The claiming bond. When wolves truly mated, they shared everything, including their very essence. You have to bite me, she gasped. Complete the bond. Cale didn't hesitate. He pulled her close and sank his teeth into the junction of her neck and shoulder. Pain flared bright and sharp, then transformed into something else entirely. Pleasure and power intertwining until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. His strength became hers, his spirit sustaining what she'd depleted. And in return, she gave him something he'd never had, the ability to create as well as destroy, to heal as well as harm. They were balanced now, complete. When Sarah opened her eyes again, she found herself cradled in Cale's arms. The veil rift was gone, sealed completely. The Shadowborn had vanished. And in the eastern sky, dawn was breaking. That's it? Mira breathed, staring at the empty air where the veil rift had been moments before. 6 months of hell, and it closes that easily? Not easily, Kyle said grimly, his arms tightening around Sarah. It cost us everything to find the one person who could end him. Sarah's legs gave out, and Cale caught her weight, lowering them both to the ground. Easy, you're not standing yet. Let the bond stabilize first. She nodded, leaning against him as the world slowly came back into focus. Minutes passed as the bond settled into place, warmth flooding back into her limbs. Tobias appeared at Cale's side, bloodied but grinning. All refugees accounted for, Your Majesty. Around them, celebrating warriors and weeping refugees gathered. Sarah took a steadying breath, then allowed Cale to help her stand, keeping one arm around her waist for support. You did it, Kale whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. You saved us all. We did it, Sarah corrected. Then, louder, to the gathered crowd. We all did it. Together. A cheer rose from the refugees, the people of Silvercrest who'd lost everything but survived. And standing among them, Sarah saw her mother and sister, both crying and smiling and whole. Sarah met her mother's eyes across the crowd. She saw the grief and relief warring there, and knew that later, when the celebrating ended, tears and explanations would come. The painful unraveling of a lifetime of secrets. But for now, her mother simply mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Dominic was there too, looking small and ashamed. When their eyes met, Sarah felt nothing. No anger, no regret. He was simply part of a life she'd outgrown. What happens now? She asked Kale quietly. Now? He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Now we rebuild. Silvercrest, the border territories, everything the Veil Rift destroyed. And you help me, not as a weapon or a tool, but as my equal, my mate, my partner in every way that matters. I'm still learning. I'm going to make mistakes. Good. I'm tired of people who pretend to be perfect. Kale's arm remained secure around her waist. Besides, I make enough mistakes for both of us. Mira appeared at their side, grinning despite her exhaustion. The council is going to have an apoplexy when they see you two. An Alpha King truly mated to an Omega? They'll be clutching their pearls and drafting new laws for decades. I, for one, can't wait to watch. Let them. Kyle pulled Sarah closer. I didn't spend 5 years searching for her just to let protocol keep us apart. As the sun rose fully, bathing them all in golden light, Sarah felt peace settle over her for the first time in her life. She'd lost a brother she never knew she had. She'd gained a mate who saw her as an equal. She'd discovered a power that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But most importantly, she'd found where she belonged, not in spite of what she was, but because of it. I love you, she said suddenly. Kale's eyes widened, then softened with an emotion so intense it stole her breath. I love you too. I think I have since the moment you stood in that hall and refused to beg. Since you chose dignity over safety. I chose myself, Sarah corrected. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And somehow, that led me to you. To us, Kyle agreed. And there, among the ruins and the refugees, the destroyed and the reborn, the Alpha King claimed his Omega mate with a kiss that tasted of morning and new beginnings and futures yet unwritten. Behind them, the people cheered. Ahead of them, the work of rebuilding waited. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with the dawn breaking across the sky, Sarah and Kale simply existed. 2 halves of one whole, balanced at last. The Sunweaver had found her light. And it was enough.